Hello everyone, it's Scott again from Heroic Studios Gaming. As you can see by this image right there, today I'm going to be talking about the Blade Runner, or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep book by Philip K. Dick. I already made a video on this once, but then I went back and read it again, and in that video I did have my copy, which I still have, and it looks a lot like that one, beaten cover and everything. But I don't have it with me right now because I'm moving soon, and so I have it packed up in a box. I thought I had it in that box so that I could show it to you when I did my review, but it's not in there. So I assume it's in one of my other boxes of library books that I have packed away. But I definitely know it was there. I definitely checked for it. But anyway, so I have this digital version, but it looks just like that. Mine had a red sticker on it, though, at some point because I had it in the fraternity library. But anyway, let's get into the story and not me talking about the copy of the book that I had. The reason why I remade the video is because I went back and read it again and realized that I had forgotten a whole bunch of stuff, or had not quite understood because I read it when I was a 16-year-old boy and not a man, and so there were some bits of it that I didn't quite understand, and now that I'm, older, wiser, and married, understand some bits of the book a little bit better. So let's talk about it. So Android's Dream of Electric Sheep is a novel by Philip K. Dick, and like all typical Philip K. Dick novels, it's actually a philosophical question wrapped around with a story. So the question that is proposed is, do androids dream of electric sheep? The philosophical question that is posed is, what makes a human and a replicant different? That's basically the whole focus of the book. It follows Rick Deckard, who is a person who works for the LAPD, ostensibly. He's kind of more of a bounty hunter. He does work for the LAPD, and he has an office, and he does his daily work, and he has a boss, but he takes on these replicant killing jobs as bounties because he needs money, which is great because in the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep / Blade Runner world, there was nuclear war and stuff went real bad, and there's all kinds of damage and destruction all over the place. In fact, like half the book, he's really kind of focusing in on what the radiation level in the atmosphere is today. It's a big factor that plays into it. So Earth sucks. Everybody's left. Most of the people have left anyway. And the only people that have remained are either people who just are really too stubborn to leave, or specials, which are people who are essentially kind of mutant, kind of mentally handicapped, or whatever the case is. But lots of other people have left the planet, and part of the reason that they left the planet is because by going to the cool colonies that were made to get people off the planet, because the planet sucks, mostly on Mars. I don't really think there were anyone else anywhere else, but in the movie they sort of imply like all of the planets, but the book seemed to focus mostly on Mars. To go off planet, the Rosen Corporation offers them a free android to go with them. The androids are Nexus 1 through 6 mostly, and the Nexus 6 models are the most current model. But the problem is that in order to give these androids to people, which look like people and act like people but are not people, they made an agreement that they wouldn't let them loose on Earth. However, the Rosen Corporation disagrees with this. They sell them wherever they can, obviously, to make money. And so in order to distinguish them from humanity, humans created a series of different tests. Now, the Voight-Kampff test is the most recent and current test, but there are other tests. And in fact, in one of the books, or in one of the chapters, they investigate, or Deckard and another detective investigate this other kind of test that he is never heard of before, but seems to potentially work. So they there's that. But the reason why they keep developing new tests is because each time they develop a test, the Rosen Corporation actually puts effort into subverting it so that the next Nexus model can beat the test, thereby making it hard for the people like Deckard who hunt these rogue replicants to find them. So there's a thing in the book about this sort of corporate greed where the corporation continuously wants to be able to beat the Blade Runner's tests, these replicant killers tests, and so they keep finding out about them and developing ways to beat them, which is why we have a scene where Deckard uses the Voight-Kampff tests on Rachel, who is supposedly human but is not, because Rosen Corporation was trying to see if they could trick Deckard, and if they had, in fact, within the Nexus 6 model, been able to beat the Voidcom test. And they find out that they didn't, but they're very close, because he has to ask a lot more questions to Rachel than he's ever had to ask before. Rachel also supposedly has implanted memories, which is part of the reason why they explain that it took so much time. But there's a little bit to that, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Deckard is married. He lives in San Francisco. He's a San Francisco cop, and he does this replicant hunting for extra money. Because there's a whole lot of nothing going on in the world, there's a whole lot of unemployed people, so the fact that he has money is a pretty good thing. But there's still a flourishing city in San Francisco, and everyone has animals, because empathy became a very big thing when robots who don't have any started trying to blend in with humanity. So being able to prove that you have empathy means that you're not an android, which means people can trust you, means you're human. There's a whole lot of philosophical stuff in the book, too, revolving around empathy, because people show it in different ways. And one thing that took off is Mercerism, a belief in a guy who has compassion and can resurrect dead animals and things. It's kind of like a Jesus Christ figure in a, cyberpunkian world. But Mercer was supposedly a mutant that was alive that could do this whole resurrecting animals thing, was killed by some people, and then rose from the dead again. That's why I mean it's like a Jesus figure. He's a virtual entity that everyone links into by touching these Mercer boxes. Now, Deckard himself doesn't really believe in the Mercer box so much. He does kind of do it only because it's like the thing to do. But he and his wife both have a personal empathy, I can't remember what exactly they call it, but a personal device that they use to influence their feelings every day. It's in their apartment. And his wife has, for whatever reason, decided she wants to go down the depressive path, and she's choosing all of the things that'll make her feel bad, which Deckard doesn't like. Meanwhile, Deckard takes care of a sheep. Wow. Problem is, real animals are hard to come by, and they're hard to maintain. So they're, they do exist, but they're very expensive, and Deckard can't afford them. So Deckard has an electric sheep, a fake sheep. And the reason he has a fake sheep is because he had a real sheep. He actually did. He and his wife had a real sheep, and it died. And then in order to try to replace it, they would have to spend money they didn't have. So they instead bought a replicated fake version of the sheep, which is an electric sheep. And it's the thing that Deckard thinks about and dreams about all the time. Meanwhile, his neighbor has a horse, and he doesn't let on. The neighbor and he talk a few times about their animals. Deckard never lets on that he has an electric sheep until much later in the story. But they, he's going about stuff, and he's trying to make his wife happy. So he's like trying to figure out how much certain animals would cost, and he's trying to do things. And the reason he accepts the job to kill the 6 replicants that have come to Earth that one of the other guys discovered is because they're going to offer him a ridiculous sum of money to do it. So he's like, well, that's great, because that means I can buy this giraffe that I saw down by the market, down by the pier, for my wife, and we can have this thing, and we'll be happy, and we'll have this animal. It'll be like a kid, but not really a kid. So we follow this story of Deckard going about trying to hunt down these replicants and take them out. The same replicants who took out his, partner, kind of, not really a partner, but some other person, this other bounty hunter that works in his same department. And then they play some tricks on him. One of the tricks they play on him is through the Rosen Corp, where the Rosen Corporation tries to convince him that a person is a human, and he figures out that she's a replicant based on the Voidcom test. Then they try to explain that she has implanted memories, but we find out later on that may not be the case. Rachel, the character, is a femme fatale, and her job is to make Deckard have empathy toward the androids. That's her whole job. So spoilers, but she's a plant, and her job is to distract him and make him not want to kill the replicants, and she's supposed to try to establish a empathetic relationship, which she uses sex to kind of do. But he ends up realizing that he's being played, and even though he got played, he goes through with it, but then he realizes he got played. He knows he got played, and he decides to, just push back anyway and prove that the corporations don't control him. Meanwhile, we follow a character who he lives in an apartment by himself. He has a Mercer box. He watches the 24-hour talkie head popular guy that everyone knows about, and then he discovers he has a neighbor downstairs, which turns out to be one of the replicants that Deckard is hunting. And he goes down to meet them and figures out that this person is obviously not human because they don't know things that people should know, like this popular talking head that is all over the place all the time. And so he figures out that she's a replicant, but he doesn't care because he works for an animal repair shop, and his job is to repair electric animals. So he's a special. So he tries his best to... he just becomes friends, and we follow the story of the replicants, and we can see sort of their side of the story, their humanity, the things that they've kind of gone through, and this character helping them out. And also the way we experience Mercerism in the story is through his interactions with the Mercer box and his discoveries about Mercer, which later come up at the end of the book to be false. It was all a visual creation based on some people who were trying to figure out a way to influence as many people as possible, potentially the government. It's not really clear, but the talkie head guy exposes that as the whole thing, Mercer thing, as fake, and that's what happens near the end of the story. But meanwhile, Deckard goes along. He gets somebody tries to pretend to be one of the Russian police. Turns out to be a replicant. He kills them. He tries to kill one of the other replicants. Tries to arrest her and kill her. But she ends up turning it on him and calling the police. He gets arrested. He ends up in a police department where, for a brief moment, they make him think that maybe he's a replicant. Very brief moment. But he's kind of like, wait, what? Because they're supposedly the police department, and they have no idea who he is. They don't know his police office. They're in this brand new, nice building. They're like, that was an old building. I think you're a replicant with an implanted memory, because he knows that they can implant memories now because of Rachel. And they try to convince him that he's a replicant, but he figures out that, they're lying to him. And so a lot of stuff goes from there, in which he and one of the other detectives, they try the void comp test on each other, and things like that. And the story goes pretty cool. At the end of the story, there is a bit of strangeness because the other detective turns out to be a replicant and joins the correct police department based on the fact that they know he's a replicant. Some stuff happens and he kind of gets hurt and everything. But anyway, Deckard fights the bad guys, and then the interesting part is the book doesn't end with with him achieving his goals. It ends instead with him taking a walk in the wilderness, where he ends up kind of replicating the Mercer experience. Not exactly, but pretty much the same thing. And he emerges from the other side a new person, after which he takes his new person self and a bullfrog that he finds on the way, and he takes it with him, the bullfrog being one of the symbols of Mercer, takes it with him back to his wife, and they establish a newfound relationship, knowing new things about each other because she's realized that she has been doing it wrong the whole time. It's a very good book that examines the idea of like us being manipulated by our memories, and how do we know if we're human? Do we know we're human because we have compassion, or do we think we're human because we have pretend empathy, right? So this is sort of the question that gets posed in the book, and we get to follow a guy as he actually hunts down like these sci-fi android things, and they also try to trick him and kill him. Some things he does are pretty clever. Some things are cool tech. Some things decisions he makes, he decides to buy a goat at some point and bring it home, and then somebody decides to kill his goat, right? So there's this whole thing about these animals, real live animals versus fake animals, the amount of money that everyone has, the amount of life the type of life they have to live in this world, and like the radiation and specials and mutations. It's a very good book. It's also very short because Philip K. Dick wasn't super great at writing ridiculously long books, but it is a good book, so I will give it 2 thumbs up, as I would always do, and I would try to convince you to go read it. It's very good. I haven't spoiled like things for you. There's a whole lot, even though you know some things that are going to happen. There's a lot of action sequences in the book that are super good that I didn't go into detail for, so that if you decide to read it, you can read the action sequences yourself, and you can also delve into the back and forth Mercerism thing that goes on in the book. There's a lot of it, so very good. I hope you do read this book, and I hope you enjoy it. And now that I've actually told a much more accurate assessment of Blade Runner, I hope that anyone who did see the previous video will watch this one and go, now that is the Blade Runner I remember. So I will see you all later.